What if I told you that the air freshener you've been using is actively poisoning your home? While you're spraying synthetic chemicals into the air your family breathes, there are 20 living plants that will make every room smell incredible, filter out actual toxins, and transform the energy of your entire space. Plants that ancient healers valued more than gold, that royalty across civilizations designed entire gardens around, that modern science has now proven do things no chemical spray will ever accomplish. Most people think fresh air comes from a can. They're wrong. Today, I'm showing you all 20 of these plants, ranked from impressive to absolutely extraordinary. Number 14 releases its fragrance only at night, and people have restructured their entire bedrooms around it. And number 20? That's a flower used in 3,000-year-old burial rituals for its overwhelming power. Let's dive in. Here's what most people don't understand about indoor air quality. The average home today is sealed tight for energy efficiency, which means you're breathing recycled air filled with volatile organic compounds from furniture, formaldehyde from carpets, benzene from cleaning products, and dozens of other invisible toxins that accumulate in closed spaces. The air freshener industry convinced us that masking bad smells is the same as cleaning air. It's not. Those plugins and sprays are adding more chemicals to an already toxic environment, releasing phthalates and synthetic fragrances that your lungs were never designed to process. But there's an ancient solution that predates the entire synthetic fragrance industry: living plants that don't just mask odors, they eliminate them at the molecular level while releasing natural compounds that actually improve your health. Let me show you how this works. Before we get into the list, I need to tell you about 3 plants that will completely change how you think about fragrance. One of them was so valuable in ancient Persia that traders would travel months across deserts just to acquire a single cutting. Another one releases a compound that NASA scientists discovered is more effective at removing toxins than most mechanical air purifiers that cost hundreds of dollars. And there's one plant on this list, I'm saving it for later, that only blooms in winter, right when your sealed home needs it most. The ancient Egyptians placed it in tombs because they believed its fragrance was powerful enough to guide souls into the afterlife. These aren't just decorative plants. Each one is doing something remarkable to the air in your home. Let's start with number 1 and work our way up. Plant number 1, lavender, the ancient sleep medicine. Let's start with a plant that's been misunderstood for generations. Most people think lavender is just a nice-smelling herb for sachets and bath products. They have no idea what it's actually doing. Lavandula angustifolia has been used as medicine for over 2,500 years. Ancient Egyptians used it in mummification. Romans scented their bathhouses with it. The name literally comes from the Latin word lavare, meaning to wash. But they weren't just making things smell nice. They understood something profound. Modern neuroscience has now proven what ancient healers knew instinctively. Lavender contains linalool and linaloyl acetate, compounds that directly affect your GABA receptors, the same neurological pathways targeted by prescription anxiety medications. Studies from the University of Maryland Medical Center show that inhaling lavender fragrance measurably reduces cortisol levels, lowers heart rate, and improves sleep quality in controlled trials. Growing lavender indoors requires full sun, excellent drainage, and minimal watering. Place it on your brightest windowsill. The fragrance is strongest when you brush against the leaves, releasing the essential oils. One healthy lavender plant in a bedroom will scent the entire space naturally while actively calming your nervous system every single night. Plant number 2, jasmine, the nighttime neurochemical. If lavender is the gentle healer, jasmine is the powerful transformer. Jasmine embolianthum produces cascading vines covered in tiny star-shaped flowers, and when they bloom, the fragrance is legendary, sweet, warm, exotic, with a depth that perfume houses have spent centuries failing to replicate artificially. But here's what changes everything. Research from Ruhr University in Germany discovered that jasmine fragrance doesn't just smell pleasant, it modulates your brain chemistry. The scent molecules bind to GABA receptors with measurable sedative effects comparable to pharmaceutical agents. Traditional healers in India, China, and Persia prescribed jasmine for insomnia and anxiety for thousands of years. They didn't have the neuroscience, they just knew it worked. The fragrance peaks in the evening, which makes jasmine evolutionarily brilliant for indoor spaces. As daylight fades and your body prepares for rest, jasmine releases its strongest compounds exactly when you need them most. Jasmine needs bright indirect light and cool nights to trigger blooming. Give it a small trellis to climb. In late winter and spring, it will reward you with hundreds of flowers at once, filling entire rooms with fragrance that's literally medicinal. Plant number 3, gardenia, the southern statement. Gardenia jasminoides is not subtle. This is the plant that wealthy southern estates built entire courtyards around, that Coco Chanel kept throughout her apartment year-round, that luxury hotels paid premium prices to display in their lobbies. The fragrance is rich, creamy, heady, notes of vanilla, tuberose, and something indescribably luxurious. It doesn't whisper, it announces itself and fills every corner of a room completely. Modern chemistry has identified linalool as one of gardenia's key aromatic compounds, the same molecule found in lavender, working through the identical neurological pathways with documented sedative and anti-anxiety effects. But gardenia delivers it with an intensity that transforms spaces entirely. Here's the truth. Gardenias are demanding. They need bright indirect light, high humidity, acidic soil, and consistent moisture. They will punish neglect with yellowing leaves and bud drop, but when you get it right, when a gardenia blooms in your living room in January, every bit of effort becomes worthwhile. Use a pebble tray for humidity. Keep them away from heating vents. Feed them with acidic fertilizer. The reward is a fragrance so powerful it feels like a presence in your home.
Plant number 4, scented geranium, the shapeshifter. Pelargonium species are unlike anything else on this list. These aren't flowers releasing fragrance. These are leaves that smell like rose, lemon, chocolate, mint, coconut, apple, or cinnamon, depending on which variety you choose. Touch the leaf and the scent explodes. Brush past the plant and fragrance fills the room instantly. Victorian households kept dozens of varieties specifically for this reason, each plant offering a completely different aromatic experience. Traditional medicine across Europe, Africa, and the Middle East used scented geraniums for everything from respiratory issues to skin conditions to insect repellent. The essential oils contain citronellol, geraniol, and linalool, compounds with proven antimicrobial and anti-inflammatory properties. These plants are ridiculously easy to grow. Full sun, moderate water, well-draining soil. They tolerate neglect, grow quickly, and propagate easily from cuttings. One plant becomes 5, becomes 20, each one releasing fragrance with every touch. Place them in high-traffic areas, hallways, kitchens, entryways where people naturally brush against them. The experience is tactile, interactive, alive in a way no air freshener will ever replicate. Plant number 5, orchids, the tropical aristocrats. Here's where things get extraordinary. Most people grow orchids for their flowers and have no idea that many species produce fragrances that rival the most expensive perfumes ever created. Phalaenopsis orchids, the moth orchids sold in every grocery store, often have subtle, sweet fragrances, but specialized species like Brassavola nodosa release intense nighttime fragrances described as sweet citrus mixed with jasmine. Oncidium sherry baby smells exactly like chocolate. Cattleya orchids produce rich vanilla and spice notes that fill rooms completely. Orchids were status symbols in ancient China, valued by emperors and scholars for their beauty and fragrance. The cultivation of orchids was considered an art form, requiring patience, knowledge, and dedication, qualities that reflected the grower's character. Modern science shows orchids do something remarkable for indoor air. They perform CAM photosynthesis, meaning they release oxygen at night instead of during the day. In bedrooms, this creates measurably higher oxygen levels while you sleep. Growing orchids requires understanding their needs: bright indirect light, humidity, proper drainage, and patience. They bloom on their own schedule, but when they do, you have living art that scents your home naturally while improving air quality in ways synthetic products cannot touch. Plant number 6, mint, the clarity generator. Mentha species have been valued for over 3,000 years, appearing in ancient Egyptian medical texts, Greek mythology, and Roman banquet halls where fresh mint was strewn across floors to release fragrance when walked upon. The scent is unmistakable, sharp, clean, cooling, clarifying. It doesn't just smell fresh, it makes you feel alert, focused, mentally clear. Studies from Northumbria University found that inhaling mint fragrance measurably improves cognitive performance, memory recall, and sustained attention in controlled trials. The active compound is menthol, which triggers cold-sensitive receptors in your nasal passages, creating that signature cooling sensation. Traditional medicine across cultures used mint for digestive issues, headaches, and respiratory congestion. Applications modern research has now validated. Growing mint indoors is almost foolishly easy. Moderate light, consistent moisture, and containment. Mint spreads aggressively, so keep it in pots. Brush the leaves regularly to release oils. The fragrance is instant, powerful, and functional. One mint plant in a kitchen or workspace creates an environment that feels genuinely fresher, cleaner, more alive. Your brain interprets the scent as a signal that the space is clean and safe, an evolutionary response to compounds that actually do have antimicrobial properties. Plant number 7, eucalyptus, the respiratory medicine. We need to talk about eucalyptus because this plant physically changes how you breathe. Eucalyptus cinerea, the silver dollar eucalyptus, produces round, silvery blue leaves on arching stems that are extraordinarily beautiful. But the real story is what those leaves release. Eucalyptol, also called 1,8-cineol, is the primary aromatic compound in eucalyptus. It has documented bronchodilatory effects, meaning it literally opens airways. Clinical studies show it reduces congestion, has antimicrobial effects against respiratory pathogens, and produces measurable improvements in breathing for people with asthma and chronic bronchitis. Australian Aboriginal medicine used eucalyptus for respiratory illness for thousands of years before European colonizers recognized its properties and created the global eucalyptus industry that now underpins everything from cough drops to chest rubs to hospital disinfectants. The fragrance is medicinal, forest-like, clean in a way that feels biologically active. Because it is. You're not just smelling something pleasant, you're inhaling compounds that change your respiratory function. Growing eucalyptus indoors requires maximum light and good drainage. It grows quickly and can be pruned regularly. Those pruned branches last weeks in a vase, continuously releasing their compounds throughout your home. Hang fresh eucalyptus in your shower. The steam activates volatile oils, releasing them directly into the air you breathe. It's one of the simplest, most effective things you can do for daily respiratory health. Plant number 8, rosemary, the memory guardian. Rosemary officinalis appears in some of humanity's oldest written records. Ancient Greeks wore rosemary crowns while studying because they believed it improved memory. They were right. Modern research from Northumbria University found that simply inhaling rosemary fragrance measurably improves memory performance and cognitive function in controlled trials. The active compound, 1,8-cineol, crosses the blood-brain barrier and affects neurotransmitter systems involved in memory formation and recall. Shakespeare wrote "Rosemary for remembrance" in Hamlet. Medieval scholars burned it in libraries and study halls. Traditional medicine across Mediterranean cultures prescribed it for mental clarity, focus, and concentration for thousands of years. The fragrance is woody, resinous, slightly camphorous, a scent that makes you feel alert and present. It's the smell of focus, of mental clarity, of cognitive sharpness. Rosemary needs full sun and minimal water. It's drought-tolerant, pest-resistant, and nearly indestructible. Place it in bright light and mostly ignore it. Brush the needles to release oils. The fragrance fills spaces quickly and lingers. One rosemary plant in a workspace or study creates an environment that feels conducive to concentration, not because of placebo, but because of measurable neurochemical effects on your brain's memory systems. Plant number 9. Peace lily, the silent detoxifier. Peace lily doesn't announce itself. It doesn't fill a room with heady perfume or demand your attention. What it does is quieter and far more important. Spathiphyllum wallicae produces a clean, faintly sweet fragrance, like fresh air after rainfall. Subtle, almost invisible, but NASA scientists studying indoor air quality discovered what was really happening beneath that quiet exterior. Peace lily ranked among the highest of all plants tested for removing benzene, formaldehyde, trichloroethylene, xylene, and ammonia from indoor air. These aren't exotic pollutants. They're present in virtually every home right now, releasing silently from paint, furniture, cleaning products, and carpeting. Indigenous communities in tropical Central America understood this intuitively. They didn't have laboratory instruments, but they knew that spaces where peace lilies grew felt different, cleaner, more alive. Peace lily is effortless to maintain. Low light, moderate water, forgiving of neglect. It tells you when it's thirsty by drooping slightly, then recovers fully once watered. Most air fresheners spend their entire existence covering up what's wrong with your air. Peace lily spends its entire existence fixing it. Plant number 10. Hoya, the porcelain deceiver. Hoya carnosa looks almost artificial. The clusters of star-shaped flowers are so perfectly formed, so waxy and symmetrical, that people reach out to touch them just to confirm they're real. Then the fragrance hits. Warm vanilla, dark chocolate, a richness that deepens as evening falls and becomes something almost impossible to describe accurately. Hoya's scent profile actually shifts throughout the day. Light and sweet in the morning, complex and intoxicating by night. In Southeast Asian traditional medicine, Hoya was grown inside homes for generations, not as decoration, but deliberately, intentionally, because people understood it changed the quality of the space. NASA's clean air research confirmed Hoya as an effective absorber of formaldehyde and volatile organic compounds, the invisible toxins off-gassing from nearly every surface in your home. Here's what makes Hoya remarkable beyond all of this. It is nearly indestructible. Low light, infrequent watering, years of neglect. It survives everything. Some Hoyas grown by grandparents are still blooming in their grandchildren's homes decades later. One rule only: never remove old flower spurs. New blooms emerge from those exact same spurs every single year. Plant 11. Lemon balm, the forgotten anxiety remedy. Melissa officinalis has one of the longest medicinal histories of any plant on this list. Ancient Greeks dedicated it to the goddess Diana. Medieval European monasteries cultivated it specifically for its calming properties. Paracelsus, one of the founding fathers of modern medicine, called it the elixir of life. The fragrance is bright, citrusy, clean, like lemon without the sharpness. Brushing the leaves releases it instantly. But what's happening neurologically goes far beyond pleasant scent. Clinical studies published in peer-reviewed journals show that lemon balm compounds, particularly rosmarinic acid, inhibit the enzyme that breaks down GABA in your brain. More GABA means less anxiety, less mental noise, more calm. Traditional healers prescribed it for exactly this effect for centuries before neuroscience could explain the mechanism. Growing lemon balm indoors requires moderate light and regular moisture. It grows enthusiastically, almost aggressively, and rewards frequent harvesting. The more you cut it, the more it produces. Place it in a kitchen or living room. Brush the leaves when you walk past. What happens next isn't placebo. It's biochemistry that humanity discovered thousands of years ago and then quietly forgot. Plant number 12. Wax begonia, the underestimated air worker. Nobody talks about wax begonias in conversations about fragrance. That's a mistake. Begonia X semperflorens produces a faint, fresh, green fragrance, more atmospheric than perfume. It doesn't dominate a room, it contributes something harder to name, a quality of freshness, a feeling that the air is alive rather than stale. But the more important story is what wax begonias do that you cannot smell at all. Research has identified begonias as effective processors of indoor air pollutants, particularly in spaces with limited ventilation. They transpire heavily, releasing moisture and contributing to the humidity balance that affects how every other fragrance in your home is perceived. Traditional use across tropical cultures treated begonias as protective plants, grown near entrances and windows, positioned deliberately to create a barrier between outdoor pollution and indoor living spaces. They are extraordinarily easy to grow. Bright indirect light, moderate water, almost any indoor condition. They bloom continuously for months, and they create the kind of quiet, atmospheric freshness that no synthetic product has ever managed to replicate, because no synthetic product is alive. Plant number 13, Plumeria, the temple flower. Plumeria is the flower you know from Hawaiian leis, those cascading garlands of waxy, intensely fragrant blooms in white, yellow, and pink. But Plumeria's history goes deeper than tropical tourism. In ancient Mayan culture, Plumeria symbolized life, birth, and immortality. In Hindu and Buddhist traditions, plumeria flowers are offerings placed at temple altars because their fragrance is considered sacred, a bridge between the physical and the divine. Across Southeast Asia, it's planted at temples and burial grounds alike because the fragrance is understood to transcend ordinary experience. The extraordinary scent is sweet, rich, tropical, with a depth that shifts depending on variety and time of day. Some plumerias lean towards coconut and citrus, others towards warm spice and honey. All of them fill rooms completely. Modern aerotherapy research has identified plumeria's fragrance compounds as having measurable mood-elevating effects, increasing feelings of well-being, reducing tension, elevating emotional state in ways that have been documented in clinical settings. Growing plumeria indoors requires maximum light and a dry rest period in winter. It is decidedly not a beginner plant, but when it blooms inside your home, the experience is genuinely unlike anything else on this list. A fragrance that civilizations considered sacred for thousands of years, now living on your windowsill.
Plant number 14, Night Blooming Cereus, the Midnight Event. This is the one I mentioned at the beginning, and it earns its place completely. Epithyllum oxypetalum, the night-blooming cereus, blooms exactly once per flower, one night only. The bloom opens after dark, reaches full fragrance between midnight and 2 in the morning, and closes forever before sunrise. The fragrance released during those hours is extraordinary, sweet, warm, intensely floral, with a vanilla depth that perfumers have attempted to capture for centuries. People who have experienced it describe clearing their schedules around it, sitting awake deliberately to witness something that will not happen again from that particular bloom. In ancient Mesoamerican cultures, the night-blooming cereus was considered a sacred plant, its single-night blooming cycle understood as a teaching about impermanence, presence, and the value of paying attention. Traditional healers used it for heart conditions and anxiety, applications that modern phytochemistry is beginning to explore. The fragrance works differently than every other plant on this list because it is designed by evolution to work at night, to attract specific nocturnal pollinators, releasing compounds at maximum intensity precisely when your brain is in its most receptive pre-sleep state. Growing it requires patience, bright indirect light, and minimal watering. It may not bloom for a year. When it does, you will remember it. Plant number 15, Sweet Olive, the Hidden Legend. Osmanthus fragrans is perhaps the least known plant in the Western world and the most beloved fragrant plant in Chinese culture.
That gap in awareness is remarkable given what it does. The fragrance is unlike anything else: apricot, peach, and jasmine woven together into something simultaneously fruity and floral. In China, it has been cultivated for over 2,500 years. Sweet olive tea, sweet olive wine, sweet olive perfume, entire industries built around a single plant scent. Traditional Chinese medicine used osmanthus for emotional balance, specifically prescribing it for grief, sadness, and melancholy, understanding intuitively that its fragrance had mood-altering properties. Modern research has identified its key compounds as having anti-inflammatory and anxiolytic effects. The plant itself is slow-growing, patient, and extraordinarily generous once established. Bright, indirect light, moderate water, slightly acidic soil. The tiny, almost invisible flowers produce fragrance so powerful that a single mature plant scents an entire floor of a home. In Chinese poetry, across thousands of years, osmanthus represents transformation, beauty emerging from patience, and the rewards of paying attention to things the world overlooks. Plant number 16. Sweet basil, the sacred kitchen guardian. Most people know basil is a cooking ingredient. Almost nobody knows what it's doing to the air around it. Ocimum basilicum has been considered sacred in cultures across 3 continents for over 4,000 years. In India, holy basil, Tulsi, is worshipped as a living deity, kept in homes as a divine protector. In ancient Egypt, it was packed into tombs. In Greece, it was placed on windowsills as a spiritual guardian. The fragrance is warm, sweet, slightly spicy, unmistakably alive. But the chemistry behind it is extraordinary. Basil releases eugenol, linalool, and astragol, compounds with documented antimicrobial properties that actively reduce airborne bacteria and mold spores in enclosed spaces. Research published in food and environmental microbiology journals confirmed that basil's volatile compounds measurably inhibit the growth of airborne pathogens. Traditional healers weren't burning basil in temples purely for ceremony. They were sanitizing the air. Growing basil indoors requires full sun and consistent moisture. It rewards frequent harvesting. The more leaves you take, the more vigorously it produces. Place it in a kitchen where cooking releases heat, and the warmth activates its oils continuously. A basil plant isn't just fragrance, it's a living antimicrobial system that humanity has been quietly using for millennia. Plant number 17. Passion flower, the anxiety architect. Passiflora incarnata produces one of the most structurally complex flowers in the natural world. Intricate, almost engineered looking, with a fragrance that is light, sweet, and subtly exotic. Spanish missionaries encountering it in South America in the 16th century believed its flower structure represented the crucifixion of Christ, the 3 stigmas as nails, the corona as the crown of thorns. They named it passion flower. But indigenous communities across the Americas had understood its real power long before that encounter. Traditional medicine of the Cherokee, Aztec, in multiple South American cultures used passion flowers specifically for anxiety, insomnia, and nervous tension, not symbolically, medicinally, as a prescribed, trusted treatment. Modern clinical research has validated this completely. Studies published in the journal Phytotherapy Research show that passion flower extracts reduce anxiety as effectively as pharmaceutical benzodiazepines in clinical trials, with significantly fewer side effects. The mechanism involves GABA receptor modulation, the same neurological pathway that lavender and jasmine work through. The fragrance released by the living plant carries these same bioactive compounds into your air passively, continuously, silently. Growing passion flower indoors requires bright light and something to climb. It grows enthusiastically, blooms repeatedly, and creates a living wall of extraordinary beauty. It is the most medically underestimated plant on this entire list. Plant number 18. Paper white narcissus, the winter miracle. We are in the final stretch now, and the plants get more powerful from here. Narcissus papyraceus blooms in winter, exactly when every other flowering plant has gone dormant, when days are shortest, when homes are sealed against cold, and the air inside has gone flat and stale. And then paperwhites bloom, and rooms fill with fragrance so intensely sweet, so rich and alive, that people throughout history considered their winter blooming genuinely miraculous. Ancient Egyptians placed paperwhite narcissus in burial preparations, specifically because their fragrance was considered powerful enough to accompany the dead into the afterlife. They appear in tomb art and garlands from sites over 3,000 years old. The Greeks associated narcissus with rebirth. Romans forced bulbs to bloom indoors in winter as a deliberate act, bringing living fragrance into the darkest time of year as a form of resistance against darkness itself. Modern research has identified narcissus fragrance compounds as having measurable mood-elevating and anxiolytic properties, findings that reframe what those ancient cultures were actually doing when they forced these bulbs to bloom in winter. Growing paperwhites requires almost no effort. Place bulbs in a shallow bowl with pebbles and water. Give them light. Wait 3 to 4 weeks. That is genuinely all. What blooms is extraordinary, rich, sweet, slightly narcotic in its depth. Some people find it overwhelming. Everyone finds it unforgettable.
Plant number 19, tuberose, the perfumer's obsession. Polyanthes tuberosa is the plant that perfumers consider the most difficult fragrance in the natural world to replicate synthetically. They have been trying for over 3 centuries. They have not succeeded. The fragrance is creamy, intensely floral, warm with an almost intoxicating heaviness that fills rooms completely. In 17th century France, young women were reportedly forbidden from walking near blooming tuberose in the evenings, the fragrance considered so powerfully affecting that it was deemed dangerous to unaccompanied women. Whether that prohibition was superstition or genuine observation, tuberose's effect on human neurochemistry has since been scientifically documented. Research identifies tuberose's key compounds, methylbenzate, benzyl alcohol, and farnesol, as having measurable effects on the limbic system, the brain region governing emotion, memory, and arousal. The fragrance doesn't just smell remarkable, it reaches into your emotional brain directly. In Indian wedding traditions, tuberose garlands, called Rajnigandha, are considered essential, not decorative, essential. The fragrance is understood to elevate the emotional significance of the moment itself. Growing tuberose indoors requires maximum light, warmth, and patience. It blooms from bulbs planted in spring and rewards that patience with flower spikes, producing dozens of blooms over weeks. One stem in a room changes the room entirely. Plant number 20, Boronia, the rarest fragrance on earth. And here we are, plant 20, the one this entire list has been building toward. Boronia megastigma, the brown boronia, produces a fragrance that perfumers and aromatherapists describe as among the most complex and beautiful scents found anywhere in the natural world. Rich, fruity, floral, with a depth that unfolds in layers, raspberry, rose, and something ancient and indefinable beneath both. It is native to southwestern Australia, a region of extraordinary botanical diversity that has been isolated from the rest of the world's plant life for millions of years. Aboriginal Australians understood Boronia as a sacred plant, used in ceremonial contexts, understood to carry properties that ordinary plants did not possess. The fragrance compounds in Boronia are so chemically complex that perfumers pay extraordinary prices for even small quantities of its essential oil, and most commercial Boronia fragrance remains synthetic approximation because the real thing is nearly impossible to reproduce. Modern research is still catching up to what Aboriginal medicine knew. Early studies suggest Boronia compounds have significant anxiolytic and mood-elevating effects, findings that feel less like discovery and more like confirmation. Growing Boronia indoors is challenging. It requires bright light, excellent drainage, cool temperatures, and careful watering. It does not forgive neglect.
But a blooming Boronia inside your home is not just a plant, it is access to a fragrance that most people on Earth will never encounter, a scent that evolved in isolation for millions of years and arrived, finally, in your living room. That is not decoration. That is something else entirely. If you've made it this far, you already know this list is different from anything you've seen before. If it's opening your eyes, take 1 second right now to hit the like button. It helps more people find this information. And subscribe if you haven't already, because every week we go this deep on knowledge that actually matters. Now, here's what I need you to understand about everything you just heard. This isn't a list of nice-smelling plants. What you've actually been looking at is a pharmacopoeia, an ancient living medicine cabinet that humanity assembled over thousands of years through careful observation, trial, and accumulated wisdom. Every single culture that built something lasting, the Egyptians, the Romans, the Chinese, the Greeks, indigenous communities across 4 continents, every one of them filled their most important spaces with living plants. Temples, palaces, healing chambers, burial sites. They didn't do that for decoration. They did it because they understood at a level modern society has almost completely abandoned that the air inside a space is not neutral. It is either working for you or against you. It is either carrying compounds that calm your nervous system, sharpen your cognition, open your airways, and reduce your anxiety, or it is carrying synthetic chemicals that do none of those things while pretending to. The most expensive air purifier ever manufactured cannot do what a $15 plant does naturally, continuously, and without being plugged into anything. That gap between what we've been sold and what actually works is exactly what these plants represent. There's a question worth sitting with after everything you've just learned. How did we get here? How did humanity spend thousands of years accumulating precise, tested, culturally validated knowledge about the living plants that heal us, and then trade all of it for a plastic bottle of synthetic fragrance in a single generation? The answer is convenience. We chose easy over true. We chose cheap over wise. But the knowledge never disappeared. It was waiting. In ancient texts, in traditional practices, in the quiet persistence of plants that kept growing and blooming and cleaning the air whether anyone was paying attention or not. Every plant on this list is a living record of something humanity once understood deeply. The question isn't whether these plants work. Thousands of years of human experience and modern science agree that they do. The question is why we ever stopped listening. Here is the truth that ties every plant on this list together. Your home has an atmosphere, not metaphorically, literally, a chemical environment that you are breathing continuously, that is interacting with your nervous system, your lungs, your brain chemistry, and your emotional state, every single moment you spend inside it. Right now, for most people, that atmosphere is shaped by synthetic compounds engineered to smell like nature while doing nothing nature actually does. But it doesn't have to be. Every plant on this list is a living atmospheric system, producing oxygen, processing toxins, releasing bioactive compounds that human neurology has been responding to for hundreds of thousands of years, long before laboratories, long before chemistry, long before anyone needed a study to confirm what every ancient civilization already knew instinctively. Your home can smell remarkable. It can feel alive. It can actively support your health, your sleep, your calm, and your clarity. All of that is available for the price of a plant. So tell me, which plant on this list surprised you most? Was it the one that works like anti-anxiety medication? The one found in 3,000-year-old Egyptian tombs? Or the rarest fragrance on Earth growing quietly in a pot? Drop it in the comments. I read every single one. And if this is the kind of content that makes you think differently, subscribe, because this is what we do here every week.